Hi everyone, I hope everyone's doing well. Thanks again to all my subscribers, I really appreciate the support. So I wanted to do a video about Big Brian Cockerill. As mine's a fighting channel, Big Brian was known to be one of the hardest men in Britain at one point. Now I'm going to concentrate on three of his fights, three of the toughest fights. In fact, Lee Duffy, the two fights he had with Dave Garside, and the horror house incident where he was ambushed and attacked by the gang of men, which Cookie talks about, and Davey Glover. So I've got a little clip of that as well. So this is three of Brian's toughest fights. Now, not my opinion, but the opinion of a lot of people, including Stephen Sayers, including Cookie, including Ernie Buick as well. Ernie Buick has said about Brian was the hardest man up in the northeast. And Stephen Sayers, if you ever watch Sean Atwood's podcast with Stephen Sayers, there's a bit where he talks about Brian, and he actually says on his day in his prime, Brian Cockerill was one of the hardest men on the cobbles in Britain. Now, the Lee Duffy, let's go to the Lee Duffy fight. The Lee Duffy fight, Brian has told me himself, and Brian said Lee put him down onto a knee. Brian got up, and Brian was 23, 24 stone. Lee Duffy was 14 and a half stone then. That's a huge weight difference. And Brian, if you grab hold of someone who's 10 stone lighter than you, you can chuck them about. Brian headbutted Lee a couple of times and elbowed him and managed to get on top. Brian got hit with a bottle. Lee Duffy has told people that Brian was one of the hardest, toughest men he's fought, the strongest men as well. He's told Stephen Sayers, he's told Carol, Lee's wife. So it's common knowledge that Lee had said that about Brian. Now, regarding, Brian has told me himself that the toughest person he ever fought was Dave Garside. Dave Garside, ex-professional boxer, heavyweight. And they had two fights. The first fight, Brian had been up drinking quite a lot and he'd been taking drugs and stuff. And he'd had a fight with Dave. And I think he got on top of Dave, and then he got out of breath. And as he was trying to get his breath, Dave carried on, didn't give up. Dave done Brian in the ribs and got the better of Brian. Brian then went training to get fit, came back and fought Dave Garside again and beat Dave Garside. And I think he might have even bitten his ear and broken his jaw, or bit his ear off and broken his jaw. So he got his revenge in that one. Now, there's another fight as well. I'm going to put a little video on here of anyone that is on YouTube will probably have seen Cookie and Davey Glover, anyone in this corner of YouTube. Cookie talks about the incident where Brian came to the house and he was set upon by the gang that was inside. And in Cookie's own words, and Davey Glover told him this, Davey Glover said if he hadn't have been there with the knife or the machete to stop Brian against, I think there was about 8, 9 or 10 of them, there was a big gang of them. He said that Brian was fighting all of them. They had weapons, he was ripping radiators off the wall, and Brian wasn't giving up, he was fighting for his life. And he did nearly get killed. He lost a lot of blood, hammer blows and machetes and whatever happened in that fight. And I'll put on now the little bit of Cookie talking about that. My friend Lee Wortley has edited this with the music. So this is Cookie talking about Brian when he got attacked in the horror house, they call it. I'll put it on now.
And all allegedly went doom. The truth is, all would have getting battered up the taxman if it wasn't for Glover. That's the truth. I got told the man was a maniac. He was ripping radiators up the walls and trying to beat them to death with him and all that. Aye. And if it wasn't for Davey doing what he done, he would have done them. That's the truth. That's the truth about the taxman.
So yeah, there was Cookie talking about how strong and how aggressive Brian was, even outnumbered with weapons. Now, I've thought a lot about this. Now, obviously I was a fighter, and I like to always imagine how I would come up against people like Brian. I spoke to Brian. I said to Brian, how would you fight a professional boxer? Someone who can have a stand-up fight, someone who can fight. Brian said to me his tactics were this. He would always peekaboo style come in all tucked up like that and come at you, so that if you threw a few shots at him, he would be able to block them. And then once he grabbed hold of you, being 24 stone, he would bite your ears, poke your eyes and all that sort of stuff, and just chuck you around or punch you. Now, I thought about this, and if I had to come up against Brian on the street, if he stood long range and tried to fight me with the fist, I'd be confident, because that's my game. But if he's coming at you with his high guard, the only chance you've got really is to land a shot early, like round the side of the guard, so catch him early round the side if you can, or go to the body. If he's coming up with a high guard like that, coming at you, you've got to either go to the body or try and catch him round the sides. But once he's got hold of you, I wouldn't fancy my chances against Brian. I would in a stand-up fight, because that's my area, but he's not going to do a stand-up fight with a boxer. He's going to grab hold of you. That's Brian's style. And he's so strong, he would just manhandle, even if you're 18, 19 stone. Stephen Sayers has said he has seen Brian pick up 18, 19 stone men and chuck them. He's knocked out 18, 19 stone men with slaps. That's on Sean Atwood's podcast. So I would agree with people that say on his day, in his prime, Brian was one of the hardest men in the country. He reminds me very similar to Lenny McLean. And Lee Wortley, who has done books on Lenny, 2 or 3 books on Lenny, and he's actually doing Brian's book. He's done Charlie Bronson's books. He actually said to me he would put Brian on the street above Lenny, even above Lenny. And you got to think, Brian's 24 stone. He's even bigger than Lenny. And he had, like Stephen Sayers said, he's got the bad intentions. So you combine all that together, my opinion is Brian would have been one of the hardest men on the cobbles. Me and Brian get on very well now. I've got a lot of time for Brian, and he's looked after me when I went up there. He looked after me when I stayed at his house. I've always found him to be very polite, very humble actually. He's very humble. He bigs other people up. I know people, he has a lot of people on YouTube that sort of have a go at him and this, that and the other, but I'm stating the opinions of not just me, but other people, Ernie Buick, Stephen Sayers, Lee Duffy himself said it, and the facts are there. So without a doubt, yeah, Brian was up there, and I'm happy that he's a good friend of mine. I'm happy that he's a good friend of mine. I've got a lot of time and love for Brian. So yeah, there's my thoughts and opinion on Big Brian Cockerill. I hope you're all well anyway, thank you, and I appreciate all the support. Another video coming up tomorrow. It's about another fighter. I'm not sure which one yet. It's between 2, but another video coming up tomorrow. Thank you all.